Okay, this is the very final session. I know some people are heading for the exit, but we've got a Q&A now, and specifically for Jacob Leuhorst, the CEO of Global Wind Organization, and Ole Hansen, head of DBJV of Total Energies, who are going to join the two speakers for the very final session. Please. Okay.
Thank you. Shall I be a rose between two thorns?
Okay.
I'm not saying you're thorns.
And I've had feedback that people are getting uncomfortable with my possibility of falling off the stage.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of the day, I'll say thank you ever so much, apologize to the people I'm about to turn my back on, and sit down. Okay.
Well done.
Okay. Right. Who wants to go first? Before we get to the questions for the speakers, Jacob made a couple of points in discussion that I thought were well worth airing. Will you get the chance?
Okay. Yeah, well, just put me on the spot right there. Well, thank you very much for the speakers first, because fantastic speakers, both of you, everyone here. So the point I made before in the break is that I've learned a lot today about safety mindset and leadership, a lot that will take home to my own business and where I'm coming from. But the second part of the headline of this conference is a safety mindset into the energy transition. The energy transition bit we haven't really covered a lot. So I'm from the wind industry, and I was hoping we were going to talk a lot about how do we actually do this? How do we actually take the safety mindset that you have in the oil and gas industry and has learned from so many years of experience, and how do we use that and employ that in the energy transition? How can we learn from that in wind?
Okay, that's great. So what I'll do is, when I go for questions, anybody who wants to pick up on that, pick up on that. Ole?
Yes, why don't I start? Thanks, I think that's an excellent question. And I do represent the oil industry as part of Total Energies. And actually, your question is spot on. How do we do that? I see a need in the future for a lot more people offshore, whether it's wind, oil and gas, to really make sure that we have those that are needed to do the job, really harvest the energy from the North Sea. And that transition requires that we think out of the box, and that we also break down some of the barriers that possibly a bit invisible exist between us. That we openly share a bit more about our safety performance, our safety culture, and also the journey that we have been on. And just to share with you, in Total Energies, some years ago, we looked at our safety performance, and we thought, we're actually not where we want to be, we're not where we need to be, we are hurting people on our installations. And I had good challenges from Xavier as well on that. So actually, we started that journey, or we restarted that journey about cultural safety mindset. And we took the learnings actually from Saipem, and more or less took the same approach as you did. We used the same material, and we shared it with everyone in our organization. We started with the top management, making sure that we cascaded it through, so all the leaders in the company got involved. And then we also rolled it out to the entire workforce, actually also including all our contractors, which I prefer to call partners. And that journey took us a couple of years, and we saw last year that our safety performance was the best ever. We had a recordable incident rate of below 1. We've never done that before in Denmark, so that was really a great achievement. So we were hurting less people. And I think that was thanks to this program. But it doesn't stop here, because this year we are ramping up activities, and we can actually see our performance is going a bit in the wrong direction. We are hurting more people, and we need to understand that. So we are considering to run a new program on this, and also I think that's where we can check in and help each other on this journey, because we will need more resources with the activities we have in the coming years, and I think everyone here is really in the same boat, whether it's operators or contractors.
Thanks, Ole, for the feedback. And I want to follow up to the question. I think events like these are fantastic, to help in this energy transition and this knowledge sharing, this opportunity to see perhaps best practices that comes from the oil and gas, or to create network, to meet people informally. And I think is a starting point to start and learn from each other and grow together as an industry.
I mean, it just seems very evident to myself as well, isn't it? It's a case of not reinventing the wheel. There's all of that information out there. We've heard from David as well, and it is a case of you've heard it from the oil and gas how it has worked. So, okay, there's not the ignition, there's not that same threat level that we might think, but there it really is the same dangers as well. And so, yeah, it's a case, I think, of just taking all of those tools that we have available and ensuring that almost we have got this fantastic opportunity to start at a really high level.
Okay, great. And I actually think that Dansk Offshore also could play an important part here, really bring us all together. Today is a good event, right? But let's continue on that. Let's continue this dialogue together.
Okay, I do need to stand up, or I can't turn around without falling over. Any questions now about this topic, about the sharing of knowledge, the transfer of knowledge? I suspect some of you might have questions for Mandy about her career. After that fantastic
or is that just
talk.
going to be later in the bar?
What's that, sir?
Or is that going to be later in the bar?
I'm going to give the other three a chance to say their piece, just in case you get monopolised, yeah?
It seems to me that many of our speakers have had what we would call significant emotional events that drove them into this area of safety. And I'm wondering, the individual engagement, which seems to be the word of the day here, is one thing. But can you talk a little bit about the organizational engagement? Because as personalized and internalized as that significant emotional event is, how do you convey that to an organization to get the same level of engagement?
Who wants to take that?
Well, to me, organizational engagement comes from individual engagement and starting from the very top of the organization. Of course, we training programs need to address the individuals, and we use many techniques trying to make workers more aware and so on. But as you say, if we want to change the organization, we need to start from the very top of the organization. We need to implement not a training program, but a cultural change program. And I think that this is possible. I saw this happening, and you got to engage the senior level, the senior management, and they need to drive this process.
Okay. Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say as well that we've always seen within the aviation industry is trust can take years to build, and it can be broken very, very quickly. So I think setting that tone from the top is really, really important. And it's not just got to be words on a wall. It can't just say, oh, we've got the culture written up there, it's fine. It has to be adhered to, and you have to show that you're actually actioning that all the time. And we've seen the problems within the world of medicine, whereby they think they're building up this trust culture, and then something happens, and actually someone loses their medical license, and they, are put out, to pasture, so to speak, i.e. they're the scapegoat. And suddenly the trust breaks, and not one report then comes in of a near miss. And so I think actually that organisational side of things, of that tone from the top, the actual what's actually happening, that's got to be reported through the mid-levels as well. It can't just be, we've always done it like this, so we'll carry on doing it like this. It has to be adhered to. So there can't be that middle ground of sticking ground that we so often see in businesses.
Okay. Please.
I think one of the key words I picked up today is care. We talked about mental health, and I think a key word is really care. Care for each other, and care also as a senior leader, as myself, for people around me. Being approachable, being able to listen. We heard the conversation this morning where there wasn't really listening. There was a lot of talk, but not really listening and taking in the information, processing it, and then actually doing something about it. That's the other part. So it's care, leadership, and then it's about providing clarity for our people as well. I like what Monica shared this morning as well. She put a box up with an A and a B and a straight line, and then outside this box there was a bit of chaos. And I somehow just mentally connected it to the discussion early on with yourself, Tim, around mental health being. And how can we create this space so we can sort of stay in the zone between either depression or anxiety? We don't want to be there. How can we stay in this zone? And I think that's the challenge we are faced with right now, with where the world is, and where everything that's happening around us, and the needs that we all have to feel comfortable, safe, but also feel that actually we're making a difference.
Yeah, okay. I'll venture a different kind of answer, though. So I think it's about organizations and leadership, yes, but it's also about collaboration across industries and across supply chains. And just taking it home to myself, right? CEO of GWO. If you don't know GWO, it's the OPTO of the wind industry. We have, in the last 5 years, created a system with 10 years. Sorry. 450 training sites in more than 50 countries, 135,000 people are trained to the GWO safety training standard. So that's what we do. And the only way we could do this is through collaboration amongst the duty holders. So all of them, the members are our main duty holders, and Total is invited to be a member as one of the big duty holders, BP, Shell, those guys. Come in, be part of it, help enrich us and make us better at what we do. Total recordable injury rates in the wind industry, offshore wind, around 6 in 2014, less than 4 now. It's not nearly good enough, but we're getting there. But it's not nearly good enough. So of course there's a lot we can learn from this much older industry with more, stronger institutions, stronger ties, a better culture. The wind industry is really, really, really young. Right? 2006. I was the project manager for Copenhagen Offshore Wind. Some of you were there. It was the first offshore wind conference in the world with an international audience. At the time, the 3 largest offshore wind farms in the world were in Denmark. That's 15 years ago. So that's how fast we've been growing this industry. And now we're talking about 150 gigawatts in the North Sea, right? Completely different business. And speed has been just driving us nuts. And So we really need help and can benefit from that collaboration across industries.
Okay. If I could come back with an individual case study, which I think is an interesting interplay between the individual and the organization. Been working with a multinational company recently, and the CEO came from America, spent some years in America, came back, said, the culture of this organization isn't good enough. And the management team that he inherited said, oh, it's not bad. And so he commissioned a safety culture survey, knowing full well that the overall score was going to be average. So he said, well, we'll compare countries and we'll compare divisions and we'll compare shifts. And he said, no, just give me one score. And so we got the one score, which indeed said bog average. And he put that in front of his management team. He invited the regulator, who were on their back a bit, in and said, we know we're only average, we're going to get better. Here's the plan. So I thought that was a really interesting interplay between one person and an organization. It's a big organization, multinational. So anyway, sorry. Yeah. Please, another, Liz?
Just coming back to you, Jakob, you asked about in the transition, energy transition now. Maybe it's not a question, it's a reflection that there are a lot of commonalities between the industries, especially after yesterday's events here in Esbjerg. We're going to be chasing the same workforce under pressure for societal desire to, or pressure to deliver fast. So maybe that's the key that will make the sharing happen. Mm-hmm. And also another reflection is the different industries in the transition. I sometimes get the feel that oil and gas feel like we're the one you can all learn from. But working with the different industries, maybe it's also the other way around. So we have this shared platform instead of this one and then there's the rest. Maybe that's the change that's going to happen or needs to happen now. Any reflections on that?
Yeah, Definitely a reflection on that. And you're not the first one who has that thought. Whenever I'm in an oil and gas conference, someone will come up to me and say, hey, my whole team has this Opito Bosch training. How can I get married to it and work in wind with that same training? And that thought is not in a safety leadership mindset. That's not where it's born. It's born from an Excel sheet. Right? How can I save some money on training? And when we're all there, because standardization is about also, it's about creating a culture across all suppliers in a supply chain. That's true, but it's also about efficiency. So I understand the question, but it's interesting. The first thing that hits me when I get to a conference like there, I think at least 3 people here has asked me, how can I take my oil and gas training and use it in a wind turbine? And they're 2 completely different workspaces, 2 completely different risk pictures for the technician who works there. 2 completely different tasks. Yes, there are things that are common. First aid is first aid, but first aid on a platform is not the same as first aid when you're 100 meters up in a wind turbine. Not the same. Sorry. So yeah, so that was my immediate reflection. Thank you. Sorry for calling you out, but you're not the only one who has that kind of thought. And we do ourselves too. My members are looking into an energy future, not just in the North Sea, but worldwide, where we're lacking between 500,000 and 700,000 people worldwide in the next 5 years. So new people that we need to recruit to build the plans that have been decided by policymakers. 700,000 new people. How do you get those guys in a safe way and train them and not spend months and months and months of training? You need to find a way to recognize prior competence and steal someone from other industries, construction, aviation, mining, whatever.
And some very interesting stuff being done with virtual reality.
That too. Yeah. But this is on one of the top of my risk register, or our risk register, is all of that volume of new people that we want to have in, and at the same time, a pressure to recognize competences from other industries where we don't really know what actually is in, what's in the culture, what's in the mind, what are they actually good at? How do we do this safely? That's really a scary thought.
Okay.
That is a scary thought. Fishing in the same pond for resources. And what has made us successful in the past are people. What will make us successful in the future are people who can make this difference. So we can harvest all the energy that is needed from the North Sea. And from the oil and gas industry, no, we should never be complacent. We can also learn from other industries. What we've seen today from Mandy as a great example on aviation, the standard operating procedures that should always be followed, but they're not chipped in stone. I think you said, and then that resonated with me as well. So we should still use our brains, of course, in the situations. Yeah, there's just so much we need to do on this front, really taking care of and being successful with the people we need to do all this.
Okay.
Can I just add on the resources side?
Please.
So it's interesting. So this year I've become an aviation ambassador for the Department for Transport, and they've got 12 of us because they have realised that there's going to be a massive shortfall of people from the aviation sector. And so they've got to think about how they're recruiting differently. So they've employed 12 of us, predominance are women, and we're there as ambassadors to really be going out into schools, into colleges, to really be pushing the STEM message to say, engineering is great, flying is great, it doesn't have to be from white middle-class background that goes into it, which is the traditional people that aviation is filled with. It's there for everybody. And so we're trying to really get into the underprivileged areas as well to really try to empower people. So maybe it's that whole concept of we don't always have to fish from the same pool. It really is a case of opening up our thought and thinking there's a whole population out there. It doesn't have to just be the same people that we're recruiting.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah. Good.
I agree.
Okay, I've got something I'd like to put to you. I mean, we finished with Mandy's fantastic talk, and there was that arc from it's the culture to hide it, it's the culture to celebrate it, which is a perfect encapsulation of the day, isn't it? I think so, anyway. So any questions or comments on that? I'm looking at my watch and please. If that dovetails nicely, that's perfect, isn't it?
Just I wanted to mention a comment about the wind energy, the transfer to wind energy. You mentioned about a new business, new people, different environment, so there are different hazards. But at the end, we could define these hazards. And also you mentioned about recruiting. I will state my personal experience back in '95 in Manchester, University of Manchester, when in the University of Aeronautics, the British Aerospace came, a visitor, a manager, and just said to us that lads and lasses, you are really great engineers, but you are humans, and you will make mistakes. So you have to speak loudly when you discover that you make a mistake. That's the main thing. You create a culture, safety culture, prevention, and after that, when we'll be hired, when we finish the university, we are already on the safety culture. If we don't have this experience, so young people, they enter in an organization and they might one day to work in a bank, the next day to work in an oil refinery, and the next day will work in a wind farm. So I think universities and industry should collaborate in order to make this environment. Thank you.
I agree, and I've talked to several universities about doing a risk management for individual course as a subset that you can do, a subsidiary, although none of them have actually launched them yet. They just talk about them, unfortunately. Please?
So thank you for the comments. We have two major projects this year. One of them in GWO, two major projects with the wind industry. One of them is to design or define what are the job roles, typical job roles on a wind farm, entry level, installation, operation, job roles, and associated training and competences. If we can agree about that across the wind industry supply chain, and I'm looking at you too, Ole. Okay. If we can agree upon that, we can send a very clear message to all of the universities around the world. These are the competences we need. Yeah. Get started, please. If you want to develop a supply chain in Japan and build in Japan those 25 gigawatts or whatever they want to build, these are the types of people you need, and these are how many people you need. So we're on that path, and we're pouring all of our resources into that. Except, we also have a collaboration with Opito about looking into how can we transition that existing workforce from oil and gas, also working in wind, and how can we compare the different curriculums and all of that. So those two projects are competing for resources. But those are the two big projects that we're doing right now, and I think it kind of addresses the things that you're talking about. Thank you.
It is that magic word, competencies, though, isn't it? Because it's not just training.
No, it's not just training.
And that's the whole point. And I think we originally were training in decision-making and then this, and then we realised that actually we didn't need to be assessing that. We wanted competencies because you cannot plan for every eventuality. So actually, if we give people the competencies and the skills, then they will be able to deal with the things that are outside of the norm. And that's a very, very different skill.
Yeah, maybe I didn't. So with this entry-level technician framework comes a competency assessment model.
Yeah.
So that we can also competence assess a miner
Yeah.
who wishes to get off underground and 100 meters above ground instead.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, one of the big errors we see with organizations is that they have fantastic training, but 80% of the efficacy of a training course is in the way it's followed up and embedded. And a lot of organizations are great at the training and then just wave people away and collect the happy sheets. It's that follow-up coaching piece, the embedding, the confirmation of competence under fire, you know, is where all the action is. And a lot of organizations make mistakes with that, in my experience. Please, another question? Oh, there's some over here. Two over here. Where's the mic? Yeah.
It's just a question for Mandy, really. So thank you very much for a great presentation. And at points during that, I felt my blood pressure rising quite a lot, which takes me to the point with it in terms of stressful situations and some of the leaderships and some of the people that we work with, because they are exposed to stress quite a lot. How do you come down from that? You mentioned it in terms of the bucket, and I can't remember the title of it, and removing negative stuff and that. But how do you come down from that?
Yeah, I think it's all about managing that, though, isn't it? And you're managing your levels of arousal as well, you know, in the workplace. We often sort of said our biggest fear was letting our team down. It was not being shot down. It's crazy, isn't it? That perception of threat, you know. So, yeah, it takes a little bit of a time to come down. But I've actually got a caravan now, and if I tow it down country lanes, I found that my stress levels go through the roof in case I have to reverse it. So it's amazing what you find as a different stress nowadays. Yeah.
Okay. There's a
lady in the white microphone because I had a question as well. I think it was Jakob that mentioned that the BOSIT, for instance, is mandatory to go offshore. But what we can see from very good presentations all day is also supervision and communication. So why is that not mandatory to go offshore in the whole industry?
Question for me. It should be.
It's a question for the whole panel.
It should be. But I'm not a duty holder. I'm the guy who follows, you know, the lead of the industry and does what they want me to do.
Yeah. It should be, but I'm biased because I sell training. So.
About the communication, just changing a little bit, which is another key word of today, and listening to the observation she made earlier, you know, she mentioned about that human element, you know, the fact that we're not perfect, we're going to make mistakes, so we need to speak up. And earlier on, Ole, you mentioned a key word that I pick up was clarity. And I think our culture of health and safety goes along with a culture of communication. Communication needs to be very clear from the top management, you know. It needs to be unequivocal, the message. It needs to be, the expectation needs to be communicated very clearly. Yes. You know, this is very important. But we also need to help every single worker, every single individual in the organization to have the communication skills required to deal with difficult situations, how to intervene if you see somebody committing an unsafe act, how to intervene without entering into a conflict, but actually providing feedback that can lead to some sort of behavioral change. And this is not easy, no? Sometimes people don't have the courage to speak up, sometimes intervene in a wrong way. So when we talk about training, it's also about communication at both levels, top down and bottom up.
Yeah, and assertion training, there's basic techniques like biff off. I won't go into it now, but how to be negative without offending people, like sticking to the behavior and so on. I'm very conscious that we're coming to the end. Over lunch, somebody said to me, it's incredible, the change in this conference. There are so many women here this year, and they're younger, and they're asking questions. I know the lady in the white top had a question, so that's a perfect way to finish the conference with this last question from a woman.
Thank you for describing me as young.
Relative to me, obviously.
I'm for speakers. I feel like historically there has been a perception that safety comes at a time cost, despite the fact that it's been shown not to be true. What I found really interesting about your presentation, Mandy, was that I could barely tell the difference between safety and performance in such a high-stakes environment. I wasn't really sure when one started and one ended. We've also seen a bunch of tools today, the decision-making circle. Monica mentioned being able to float crazy ideas, humble questions, and you both described very pivotal experiences with positive feedback about when you were safe at key moments in your career. My question is if we can see any opportunity to expand these tools into other spheres outside of safety, where we could perhaps improve performance, job satisfaction, engagement, and even innovation, and that may even circle back to providing a culture across other areas where we are open and honest and have integrity, and thereby also increase safety. Do we see any push to that, to expand these tools outside of the realm of safety?
Who wants to take that? Just a 10-second answer.
I think something that drives safety is also the cost of poor safety. It's not just the desire to be really great, it's the desire to be really great without breaking things, because it's super costly to break things. So that's part of, of this equation.
Yeah.
But just to sort of, I think to conclude, there is no difference really. Safety is not an add-on. No. It's not something we do as a secondary thing to our job. It's part of our job. And it's so intrinsic in every single thing that we do. So if we're acting in a safe way, we're also showing great leadership. We're also showing great communication skills. So we're also showing all of those things that lead to high performance as well. And I think all of that is tied in. And I think if we think of safety as an add-on, then we're failing in some way. It's got to be our lifeblood.
And the cost of breaking people up here is extortionate. And increasingly we're understanding that area is a whole win-win. At $2 trillion to the American economy, halve the problem, that saves you $1 trillion. I guess gives you a spending budget, doesn't it? Sorry. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to have the last word, but I do have to have the very last word. You think this conference has been good? Yeah. Yeah. You might have been to an even better one, but it won't have been much better. Sensational speakers, apart from the Welsh guy after lunch, obviously. Incredibly well organised, well put together and staged. And the one thing I really must do, the work that's gone on behind the scenes by the committee and Liz and Esben up in the box there, who's been overseeing it all day. Huge amounts of hard work. Please, could you give them a round of applause as we finish? Well, Esben just did that, which I'm going to take as positive body language, and that'll be our out. Thank you ever so much. There we go.